When a new medium comes along, the first thing we do is reproject our existing experiences onto it. So remember the first computers and what we were going to do? We were going to balance our checkbooks and store our cooking recipes. But the revolutionary uses of technology are only developed over time as we learn more about the new medium. Now we have this new medium called VR. We're starting to reproject experiences onto it, and we're seeing some really amazing world-class things, but they're still fairly straightforward reprojections. Let's take a look at some of the interesting trends that have happened so far. Now we have storytelling experiences like the Oculus Henry demo running in real time in VR, which have interactive elements. You make eye contact with this little hedgehog, and it's something you really haven't experienced in a movie before. We have VR games now figuring out the essential building blocks for highly visceral action games in VR. Now, game developers are no longer just producers of VR. We're also consumers. We're now building VR experiences within an immersive VR editing environment and upgrading our tools accordingly. Architects are using VR to preview spaces before they're fully designed, before they're built, so that clients can tweak them. Car makers are using VR for design visualization, and they're starting to retrofit their showrooms with new real-time car configurators that will soon adopt VR. Disney is now building this Star Wars expansion to Disneyland and Walt Disney World using real-time VR rides powered by the Unreal Engine. Now, these are some really amazing uses of the technology. They're improving on existing product categories. But right now, I think we're starting to see the first glimpse of something that's new, something that we have not seen before in any sort of fundamental form as this. It centers around digital humans. Now, bear with me. This requires looking at a number of elements and seeing how they're going to fit together in the future. Now, we at Epic have been working on realistic digital humans for several years now. Our new game, Paragon, this awesome MOBA action game, has been pioneering this in real time on personal computers and PlayStation. What we do now is we start with a light stage. We take photo reference shots of real humans to calibrate lighting, skin parameters, and all the other realistic parameters of a human. We simulate cloth realistically, both the materials and lighting interaction and the animation and movement. And we do this at a very high level of fidelity, sampling everything up to the level of detail of pores in human skin, so that when you zoom out and see it from a detail, it has all of the macroscopic properties you expect of a real person. There's now really interesting technology for rendering hair, with animation and lighting, including the backscattering you see of real hair in interesting lighting environments. There are elaborate systems now for rendering eyes with refractions and reflections as you expect from the real thing, and a dynamic pupil that responds to the environment and to emotions. Now, when everything comes together, you have something like this, which runs in real time today using Unreal Engine 4. Now, this is not perfect photorealism yet, but it's getting closer and closer every day. And I feel like we are not more than several years away from having an experience so realistic that it is hard to distinguish from reality. Now, I think the real magic will come when we start to put these humans together with shared virtual environments and create interactive simulations. Now, in the game industry, we've been working on these interactive simulations for decades now. We have multiplayer games. Remember Doom? This was made 21 years ago by id Software. Now, the graphics in today's games have gotten 100,000 times better. Literally 100,000 times, but the gameplay experience is still basically the same thing. You have the same mouse, keyboard, and controller. You have the same very low fidelity input bandwidth leading to very simple experiences, moving around, shooting, typing text at people. It's not really a new thing at all. Now, I believe this is going to change more over the next 2 years than it has in the past 20 years. What we're going to see are fully interactive social experiences. You haven't seen anything quite like this yet, but there's a little bit of foreshadowing now. The Oculus Toy Box demo and games like Pool Nation VR bring together multiple players into a shared virtual environment where you can see the other player's head and hands, and you can start to experience the beginning of a social experience there. Now, that's just the first step. The next step is to have outward-facing cameras that pick up your body motion, your hand motion, your fingers, and inward-facing cameras picking up your face, both the appearance of your face and all of the animation, so it can be regenerated in real time, with hundreds of degrees of freedom, with a far, far higher input bandwidth than we have today. Now, this next real phase, the thing that's going to revolutionize VR social experience is going to be on the input side, the sensor side. Now, to experiment with this, we worked together with Ninja Theory to put together this Senua demo. Now, this is built using real-time motion capture equipment. We ran it and demonstrated it completely in real time at the Game Developers Conference this year. Now, this is running on hardware that's a very custom-built rig that costs tens of thousands of dollars to put together. But it is all real time, and it shows where things could head over the next few years. Let's take a look.
Stay still, stay quiet, hide.
Their gods can see into your mind. They will use this power to destroy you.
They won't stop me. I can still feel him.
Whatever's left of him, they will never let him go.
I'm not gonna let him rot here!
You're the one rotting here.
Leave me alone!
You will die here.
No!
And all your suffering will have been for nothing!
Shut up!
So that's an elaborate, purpose-built motion capture rig that's out of the reach of consumers today, but this is going to be miniaturized very rapidly over time. And right now, we have these big-ass helmets called virtual reality, but the ultimate phase of this is going to be augmented reality. Basically, picture your Oakley sunglasses with an 8K display for each eye, filling a 160-degree field of view as you move around, something that is so convenient and lightweight. You can wear it with you everywhere you go, just like you bring your smartphone everywhere you go. This is a device that will eventually be cheaper than a television because it's built with far less material and weighs far less. I think in 15 years, there are going to be 4 billion of these things. It's going to be the future of computing. And to put this into perspective, let's back up and say every single VR headset on the market today is built with smartphone components that have been repurposed for VR. These big bulky screens, they're the wrong resolution and form factor for it. All of these other sensor devices, they're just smartphone cameras repurposed. As we see this next wave of VR purpose-built components on the hardware side, we're going to see displays that are far higher resolution, far lighter weight, and are going to bring us rapidly towards this augmented reality ideal. Now, that's just the technology and market forecast. I think the human implications of all of this are going to be much more profound. We'll be able to sample and replicate human emotion in real-time 3D. It's going to be like a form of teleportation. Elon Musk is out there building the Hyperloop, but we're not going to need that because we're just going to be able to put on this headset and communicate with anybody, anywhere in the world in real time, and other than touching them, it will be absolutely as if we were in the same room with them. Now, these digital humans, together with virtual worlds, are at the center of this revolution. And this is an idea that's been brewing in science fiction since the 1980s. It has a name. In science fiction, it's called the Metaverse. You've seen it in books like Snow Crash and Diamond Age. Now, it's partly about gaming, but it's also about a whole lot more. We're going to see e-commerce, we're going to see work from home, we're going to see it affecting all aspects of our lives. I think it really is going to be the next stage of mankind. We're now in the digital age, but I think we're really just moving out of the early formative stages, where we have these giant traditional displays that we're looking at and this clunky form of input in the form of mice and keyboards and touch screens. And we're about to see it get incredibly realistic incredibly quickly. And I think our hokey screens and ancient devices are really no match for what's coming here with virtual reality and AR. So I'd like to talk about what these experiences, these metaverse experiences, are going to look like. Well, they're not going to look like this, but the essential elements are a mix of gaming, social interaction, creative work, like painting or sketching or anything, real work, doing your job, telecommuting telecommuting, doing any sort of job from anywhere in the world, interacting with people elsewhere in the world, studying, shopping, everything that we do today in the real world, we're going to do in this VR parallel universe, and it's going to be much, much more convenient. And this also means that this metaverse is going to import all of the controversies we have in the real world. There's going to be porn, there's going to be harassment, there's going to be crime, and we as an industry are going to really have to think very carefully about how we deal with all of these challenges. Now, I'd like to be a little bit more rigorous now and define technically what I mean by this metaverse as a platform. And because we've been building up to this for a very long time now. We started in the 1980s with the internet, giving everybody global connectivity in the form of you can send any low-level packet to any other location. It was a very low-level early thing, represented by email and telnet and these other early applications. But the first big revolution that was added on top of this was the web. You had the ability to store content persistently on a web server and for people to move around these web environments through hyperlinks and experience this really interesting interactive world of information. But it wasn't at all personal. And so the big revolution with social networks was to combine together with the web individual identity and individual social communication that's very convenient. You didn't have to learn to write HTML. You didn't have to build a website. You didn't need to maintain an email list. You could just go online and through these social networks connect with all of your friends online. Now, the metaverse will use all of this stuff just as the very starting point for what's coming. And it will add new things on top of it. First of all, it will add virtual worlds. Everything from photorealistic games like Epic makes to Pixar-style, highly stylized universes. It's going to add a sense of presence where it feels like, with this hardware on, that you're actually there and you're actually interacting with it as if it's a real place. And it's going to rely fundamentally on digital humans. The ability to render people accurately, but more importantly, to scan people in real time and replicate their faces and emotions in this 3D experience. And when you put all of these components together, you're going to have something that's very different than the social network today. Social networks are primarily asynchronous. And there will be asynchronous components to this in the future, but the real experience is going to be online, live, interactive, and completely real time. Now, what's really interesting thing about this metaverse is that it's going to make everybody a creator of sorts, just as social media and YouTube made everybody a creator of 2D content and videos and text. We're going to see creation on a scale we've never seen before. Now, the biggest experience so far has been Minecraft. It's a game, and 50 million or 100 million kids worldwide have downloaded this game and started building these very simple, basic 3D worlds using Minecraft. But over the next decade, we're going to see the technologies and tools for building these worlds become far more realistic, far more powerful, and far more easy to use, so that everybody will be able to go into the metaverse, recreate their actual house, or create some fantastic virtual space where they and their friends can go and interact. And this is going to lead to an economy that's very different than the one we have today, because in a virtual world, there's no natural scarcity. Scarcity comes from business models put in place by companies. But this is going to lead to a real freeing of a lot of the economic forces today. Is to think about it, to live a high-quality life now, you have to spend a lot of money on a high-quality residence. In the future, you'll just need an apartment with the right shape. But it can have crappy materials, because you can just project wherever you want onto it. But I think this is really the beginning of a Star Trek economy. And a lot of things are being talked about right now. How does humanity deal with the fact that robots are taking over more and more human jobs? Now we have self-driving cars and robotic manufacturing plants, and there are talks about should we give everybody a basic income so that the large number of people unemployed by these technological advances will have a way to subsist. But I think actually we, as an industry, are going to be an astonishing solution to these sorts of problems, because anybody who can go online and add value in any way, playing games, being an actor, building spaces, or just participating socially, can add value to the universe, and there can be income and expenses associated with all of this. And I think we can work towards a day in our lifetimes when this virtual economy might someday exceed the real economy today. we look at the game industry now, it's $100 billion a year. That seems pretty big, but it's nothing like the $25 to $40 trillion real economy that exists today in manufacturing. But as more and more of people's lives and their quality experiences are moved online, we're not going to need all of this material. We're going to be able to do a lot more with a lot less actual physical cost and move more of it online. Now, this could either be a utopia or a dystopia when we think about it. Now, we're very fortunate that the internet evolved as an open standard and the personal computer evolved as an open specification that any manufacturer could implement. Anybody can build a program for Windows and ship it. We're seeing more and more of a trend now towards closed systems. So, Facebook, Twitter, iPhone, Android, they all want to lock you in to this one vendor's proprietary ecosystem. And they'll say it's open because they let other people put apps on their platform, but they're taking a cut of every transaction. They're monitoring everything you're doing. They're selling your data to the highest bidder. There's a lot of things going on there that we would very much like to avoid in this future metaverse. And I think we have to realize that this is always going to be under threat, because this metaverse is going to be far more powerful and pervasive than any other technology has been in our lives previously. It's going to know everything we do and see everything we see. And so if one central company gains control of this, they're going to be more powerful than any government or even any god on earth today by virtue of seeing everything. So what we really want for the metaverse is not a company, but a protocol that any developer can implement, just like any web browser maker can implement HTTP and HTML rendering and JavaScript and put together open systems out of this. We have a lot of components that are emerging that are going to be interesting building blocks of the metaverse. We have just recently, yesterday, the Kronos Group announced that they're forming a committee to study the problem of standardizing a VR API. And Valve has offered their OpenVR API to Kronos as a starting point if they choose to use it. So we're going to see an OpenVR API. We have the blockchain as an e-commerce mechanism that's open to everybody and completely decentralized as a building block of future open commerce. And there's also this crazy new thing that's come along called the interplanetary file system. It basically gives everybody unlimited storage in a completely decentralized way by layering a global file system that anybody can access on top of the BitTorrent protocol so that everybody can store and share data and participate together with public key cryptography to ensure that, when you sign something and manage your data, that you have exclusive control over it. And I think between all of these different components now, we have the ability to start building this metaverse using existing game engines like Unreal, Unity, and Crytek, and layering them on top of these existing protocols and file formats and systems, and really start getting to work building this thing. Now, this is a bit speculative. The future is always very unpredictable, yet this is real. There is no doubt when you look at all of the components, building blocks of digital humans, sensor technology, real-time game engines, real-time rendering, that it is all coming together into this one highly centralized and highly new framework that hasn't existed before. And gaming is going to be a part of it, but it's actually just a small part. It's going to be much larger than that. And I think what we're going to see with this metaverse and the interoperability it will demand is that instead of all of these separate isolated industries that are all users of VR, we're going to be linked together into one digital content industry. The cars that McLaren is building in VR, and the spaces that architects are building, and the games that we at Epic are building, and the Oculus storytelling experiences and future movies are all going to be tied together into this shared universe where everybody will be able to come along and be themselves or bring their avatar and bring their digital goods and interact in this very free form and very powerful way. And when this revolution is complete, you're going to be able to put on a very lightweight pair of glasses and then immediately interact with anyone you know, anywhere in the world, as if they are right there in the room with you. We're going to have a complete digital framework for all of this. Everybody's going to be a creator, and we're going to all participate in this revolution. I think it's going to change our lives more than any technological revolution has in the past 40 years. So I'm very excited and a little bit scared about it, and I look forward to working with all of you to be a part of this.
Thank you very much, Tim. We've got time for one or two questions. I know everyone's itching for their coffee, so one or two questions, and Tim will be around for the rest of the 2 days, so he'll be able to answer your questions in person. Thanks.
Hi Tim, my name is Simon from Studio Liddell in England. I've seen a couple of articles this year about how gamers, there's a generation of gamers spending all their time in games and not going out and finding jobs and interacting with society and stuff like that. And there's a lot of scaremongering sort of articles. But a lot of that sort of touches on what you're talking about people going into virtual worlds. So what do you think of the implications of people spending all their time in the Matrix and not being members of society?
Well, actually, I think the great thing about VR and these social experiences that are coming up is that you can be in VR and be in the real world. It's the deprivation and lack of social interaction that people tend to look negatively on computer games and all of this online gaming for. But when you're actually in this metaverse communicating with other people in the same human form, it's going to be just like hanging out in any place in the world. You'll be able to move around and get exercise in your room, and the fact that you're not in some physical location that looks exactly like what you're seeing is going to be irrelevant. And so I think it's going to be very freeing in that respect and not at all isolating.
One final question at the front here.
Do you think that people interacting through VR are likely to interact more vulnerably because they're not actually in one another's presence?
Well, that's really one of the great questions, I think, upcoming controversies, because in the real world, most people are pretty nice and reasonable because there are these social norms that we all adhere to. And then when you go online, especially on a message board or Reddit, you have people yelling at each other and flaming each other, and I really worry that VR might be on the bad side of that rather than the good side, because even though you do see somebody's face and you can interact with them, you have this actual distance between them and potentially anonymity. And so how we moderate relationships and content and interaction between people, especially people who don't have pre-existing real-world social connections, is going to be a real challenge. And especially when you layer on top the desire to do this in a decentralized way, which doesn't have Facebook or Twitter's central moderators or censors deciding everything. We're going to have open systems for that. And that's going to be a very interesting challenge that we'll have to solve in order for this medium to be successful.
Wow, thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much, Tim. Hey, Tim. Thank you. Thank you.